Hello, and thank you so much for being here. We all lead incredibly busy lives, and I hope that you'll really get a lot out of today's sessions. So quite often when I speak at events like this, how do I put this nicely? I kind of get a bit concerned that I might have to kind of unsay what some of the previous speakers have said and try and put a bit of different tilt on it to help people understand the bigger picture issues. Following Mike and Ben, I know that is completely not necessary. They're two of the top experts in this field. They're two of the best fund managers who really know their stuff and understand the big picture issues. But given what they've said, I'm going to change my slides very slightly because the title for my session is pretty similar to what Mike and Ben were saying. So I'm going to go a little bit off-piste from calling it just an introduction. And what I think I will focus on, or aim to focus on, is really what's changed, or what's changing, and really what your options are, what this means for you. Can I first ask for a show of hands? How many of you here are investors? Sorry, the lights are really odd here. So investors, okay. A good number of people here. So worth me saying, first of all, nothing that I say here is advice. I don't know your personal situations. I'm not regulated, I'm not authorized, but I have specialized in this area for, first involved in 91, full-time since 96. So how you want to count it, 25, 30 years. I've been doing just this, focusing on retail markets, so where individuals are investing. I mostly talk to financial advisors, but nothing I say is regulated, and I'm not in that situation. This is just general information to help you understand the market, so it makes it more accessible for you. So let's start with who I am first off. So look, I've worked in the area for a long time. I've worked for a couple of very big life offices over the years, investment houses. But what I do now, following 2008 financial crash when my kids were quite young, I set up my own business to basically provide information on these funds because the disclosure was terrible. People didn't understand the similarities and differences between the funds. And financial advisors found it an absolute nightmare to talk about. So I've been doing that for the last 12, 13 years, just trying to help people unpick what's available in this market. And the database is called Fund Eco Market. Our business is SRI Services. It's intended for advisors, but it's open to everybody. So anyone here can have a look at it. The information pretty much all comes direct from fund managers. So one of the things that's upset me over the years is because we've all got different opinions on this stuff, loads of analysts and even programs that are designed in particular ways, they'll interpret funds in a different way and say, well, this is rubbish or this is brilliant. But it's so subjective, it depends where you're starting from. So I prefer to take information from the fund managers and we present that to people so that people can work out whether or not it aligns to how they feel and where they believe the opportunities are going forwards. Why do I do this? Largely because I think it matters. I think clients' views should be reflected, and I think it's really important that we change where we invest, and I believe that for a very long time. And these key points on this slide haven't changed for years. They still stand. I do this because I believe in it. I'm also one of the advisors to the FCA on the new rules that were launched 2 days ago. And honestly, I've got a degree of nervous exhaustion going on in me at the moment because we really didn't know it was going to get over the line. I mean, the FCA kept saying it was all fine. But, you know, we've now got this thing called the SDR, which is a massive proposed chunk of legislation. In fact, I will show you, just to give you an idea, that is the size of it, okay? And I've spent a huge chunk of this year so far working on this with the FCA, and I'm absolutely delighted that they've done something which is different, that's realistic, that's grounded in realities and the good stuff that exists in this market. And they haven't been bamboozled too much by those people who just think, throw a load of data at it and that will solve your problems. It just won't. The area is so much more than that. And I'll just say quickly on this slide, the stuff I do, there's 24, I think it is, 24, 25 fund managers who basically pay me to keep the site going and to do what I do. So they're our partners, but what we do apart from that is completely independent. The database is my design, basically. So let's start with what's changing. We've already had quite a lot on this from Ben and also from Mike, but I mean, first to say, the world's changed, right? The climate is undoubtedly different. You've got to be pretty, well, strong-headed, shall we say, to disagree with climate change now. And, fire, floods, droughts, impacts on crops, impacts on people's lives. As I think it was Mike saying earlier, people think of it as an environmental issue. It is so much more than that. This is people not being able to feed themselves. That's why this stuff matters. It's people whose houses are on fire. It's every bit as much a social issue as environmental. And there's a bit of a thing going on in our industry at the moment saying, we never talk about social enough. Of course we do. We've been talking about it for a really long time because you've just got to understand the implications of this stuff. So it's all totally interconnected. Don't let anyone tell you these are different things. And the irony is, in many ways, that we've known for quite a long time what we need to do about most of this. We just haven't actually done it. So we know we've got to get to net zero. We used different words for it previously. Net zero came out of Paris. We know we've got to have a linear economy. We've got to stop burying or incinerating rubbish. Most of the stuff that gets pulled up out of the ground today gets buried. There's loads of information on this kind of thing on Ellen MacArthur Foundation website, that kind of area where they specialize in this. But the numbers are staggering. We are pulling trillions of tons of stuff out of the ground every year and then burning it. That simply cannot carry on. It is entirely unsustainable. And we know it's got to be a just transition. We know we've got to involve people in the process. Why? Because if we don't take people with us, then there will be pushback and it won't happen. It will slow things down. You get people being critical of the way change is happening when they're not part of the process. So we've got to find ways of bringing this all together and saying to people, no, this is for your benefit and we're going to look after you and take you with us by doing X, Y, Z. So just transition is a key concept here. One of the things that's been ignored until very recently is the fact that finance has a central role to play in addressing all of this. It's not there are people over here who make money and there's the real world over there. The two are integrally connected. So let's look at what's changing in financial services. I'm going to start with regulatory backdrop, because sometimes I have people telling me that I'm being campaigny on this stuff, and you have to push back and say, actually, this is government strategy. This is not me being somehow out on a limb. Ben, Mike, and I aren't the crazies in the room. The crazies are the people who aren't reading the information that's out there. So we know we have a net zero strategy. We know we ratified Paris Agreement. We know that government came up with the Green Finance Strategy over a year ago now, but they've been building up towards this. I've been talking with the FCA on this for probably 4 years or so on this general area, so we know this stuff is real. And I'm not going to dwell on this massively, but we also know that there's a lot of investors behind this. We're talking about $130 trillion that got signed up or pounds, I can't remember, much the same now really, isn't it? That signed up a year or so ago saying we're going to solve these problems. The industry is going to get behind this and we're going to redirect capital. We're going to do it. So these are, most of the big investment houses you've heard of have signed up to that. Now, some of them are kind of having a bit of a nervous wobble at the moment because they realize the implications are actually quite large. But that's fine. I'd rather someone was honest about these things and said, crikey, we don't really know what we're doing, than pretending they do and then actually making a pig's ear of it. So when you know what you're dealing with, you can solve it. And then there's also international standards coming through. So the ISSB, something the FCA and others have been working on, we are going to have international standards for sustainability pretty soon, within the next couple of years. Developed way faster than they were on the accounting side, but with the same discipline because it's basically the same organisation looking after it. So we're going to have international standards. We've got all investors getting behind it. And then that, of course, brings us to the FCA. So we have got lots going on at the FCA. They came up with some principles that they wrote a Dear Chair letter to all asset managers last year, basically saying this is now part of business as usual. You are going to have to make sure that what you do in this area is genuine. And sorry, my slides are so small down there, I can't read them. But the point is that the FCA has got strategies in place here. They were tasked with by Treasury with bringing climate change into their core remit now, because Treasury know that they're part of the solution. So the landscape has absolutely massively shifted. But there's been this minor issue that's evolved over the last really 5 years or so, since the area has boomed, since it's exploded, and everyone's gone, "Way, this is a massive business opportunity, let's all jump in." we've had this massive problem of greenwash that's come along. It didn't used to be like that. Whilst it was a relatively small area, those of us that were involved in it did it because we believed in it, because we understood the business imperatives, and we cared about people and the planet. What's happened recently is we've had a lot of people who've either felt obliged to go into it, or have recognised it as an opportunity and focused on that first. And that's made everything too much like standard finance, and funnily enough, it's to a large extent lost its integrity. Now, I don't think a lot of that has been done deliberately. I think a lot of that has just been done because that's how the investment community thinks. You know, we're out there to try and make money for people. That's what investment's about. But the greenwash that we've seen is, to put it mildly, pretty easily well described as being lipstick on a pig. You know, you've got strategies that are only slightly different from what's gone before, and people are marketing them as being amazing. They're not. They don't go far enough. They suit those people in the middle, those clients who do not have really strong opinions and just want to kind of hedge their bets a bit. Absolutely fine. So I'm not saying there's no market for it. But what we've got to do is up our game if we're going to sell it as being the solution to the world's problems. So what's happened recently is that you've had the SDR coming up with their most recent paper, but one of the reasons the FCA's paper is quite moderate and balanced and sensible and giving people lots of warning is because they've completely understood what some of us have been saying, which is that there is a massive difference between intentional and unintentional greenwash. And I firmly believe the majority of it is unintentional, because I have so many people come bounding over to me telling me about their new products. Can we put it in the database? It's amazing. We're really pleased with this. And I look at it and think, oh, crikey, you've got no idea what other people in this market actually do. You've got a long way to go. But they are genuine. You look at the whites of their eyes and they are excited by their products. So what they've done is they're saying, well, let's have some tram rails. Let's have guardrails, if you like, that help people to design or amend products to get them to where they actually need to be, to make sure that clients aren't being missold to. Because what we've seen recently is a massive erosion of trust in our sector, and it's been a nightmare. Because there's those of us that have, you know, over the years taken pay cuts and been laughed at and all the rest of it for years because we believe in this stuff, and now we're being told that we're charlatans. It's like, that wasn't how it was meant to work. So we've got to tidy up the area, and we've got to get all those new people who are involved to come on board with us and to come on the journey and to recognise what they've got to do. And the FCA has been really sensible, and they've been really listening. They've done loads and loads of talking with industry and loads of discussion and research with clients, so they've done a good job. All we've got to do now is get the consultation paper over the line into regulation, which is not necessarily going to be easy. So if there's anyone out here who feels so inclined, respond to the FCA on their paper. Even if you only want to answer 2 or 3 of the questions because they're relevant to you, get those responses in. You've got until 25th of January to do it, which in many ways is probably too long because it means people might forget by then. But it's good that they've given us a good long amount of time, really, on balance. So let's dig a little bit deeper into greenwash for a moment. I'm just going to give you some examples. You've heard a few references. Sorry, does everyone here know of the SDGs? Can you just sort of nod or thumbs up or something? Okay, so you know what the SDGs are. How about this for an advert that was, or I think it was actually in a sustainability report from a tobacco company recently. Big picture of SDG 3 with the words under it saying, good health and well-being, being the header. We will be offering consumers an even greater choice of tobacco products, focusing on quality, innovation, and reduced potential risks, or risk potential. I mean, how about that for a tobacco company? It's just like, what planet are they on saying that? And then there's other ones. You've got, you probably, if you're interested in this stuff, you may well have seen the panorama the other day, so I may as well tell you the next one's Drax. You've had Drax, in one of their statements they put out, they were claiming that the carbon emissions that they put out are different from the carbon emissions that come from oil because coal carbon goes straight into the atmosphere. I'm not sure where Drax carbon goes, apart from into the atmosphere. They clearly, they're not catching it in bags. It goes into the atmosphere. It's just like, this logic is just so warped. It's just infuriating. And then you've got lots of pledges that have been made where people haven't backed it up with action, and we don't know what people's plans are. So these things, the last one in particular, is not necessarily greenwash, but it's tickling the underside of it, because if you're saying, yeah, we're doing this, without telling people how you're doing it or actually making any real changes, then you've got to ask questions, and the NGOs will be asking questions, and rightly so, because they've got to hold their feet to the fire. So I was just going to give you some more specific examples here from the investment industry. I think I've already done this, but basically we're talking about over-exaggeration a lot of the time, rather than deliberate intention to mislead, which is what greenwashing really is defined as. Things being poorly explained, things being naive, and also not really understanding clients' views. You've got a lot of asset managers who, they spent their lives crunching numbers and looking at spreadsheets of, company reports and all the P&E and all the rest of it, profits, information, whatever, so financial stuff. And they don't know that clients actually generally might just be scared that I don't want sea level rises. And the difference between where one group of people think and another group of people think has been massive. So we've got to find ways of bringing those together. When I did these slides, when I first sent them in, although I ended up sending them in multiple times, I didn't know that the FCA's paper was going to have been published. So I can now put words to these slides, because it came out just 2 days ago, thank goodness. It will be that in future, funds that don't really focus on sustainability can no longer use words like sustainable, ESG, environmental, green. They won't be able to do that. They've got time to change all their marketing literature and whatever, but that will be stopped. You will then have 3 batches of funds, all of which have got to prove and have in their objectives that they're about sustainability. That is a major part of what they do. The first group, easily explained in many ways, are funds like Mike's that you heard earlier. Those are funds that clearly just look to invest in companies that are sustainable, that can carry on. The next one is going to be a little bit more, questions will be asked, but it's really, really good. It's an improvers group. So companies in that group will not be perfectly green. In fact, they will probably be very dirty and brown. But they will be companies that fund managers believe they can encourage to become greener and be part of the transition. So they're companies that we will all benefit if we can drive change there. The third group then will be a fund like the one that Ben's most closely works with, which is their impact fund, the M&G Impact Fund. So that is about measuring real world change and how the asset manager or fund manager has helped contribute to that progress going forwards. Now that's quite a difficult one to prove in equities, so I'm not quite sure which funds are going to land in and out. Some of those funds may well land up saying we're just going to call ourselves sustainability focused, but talk about impact as well. So how it's going to land, as I say, this is 2 days old. I knew the structure, but I didn't know the exact wording before, because that's kept tight in-house in the FCA. But hopefully you can see the difference there. And one of the things that will come through in that structure is the kinds of companies funds sit in. So on the left here, we've got dirty brown companies that are currently trashing the planet. On the right, we've got companies that are changing everything, that are leading the way in where we need to go and are creating solutions to the problems that we face. In the middle then, you've got companies that are a bit of both, right? And what we've got to do is drive companies over to the right, yeah? So we've got to take them across to being solutions, or at least clean green companies that can be sustained, that can carry on. So the new rules will hopefully help people to see where a fund is in terms of their investments across that spectrum. So what do you need to know? Let's do a slide on terminology, because this is one of the things that has driven me a bit loopy. In many ways, it doesn't matter what we call things, so long as you've got the action. But here are some words that will help you. So sustainable means something can carry on, right? It can be sustained. ESG means really that fund managers are focusing on risk, so they're looking at protecting investors' money. They're not trying to change anything, they're just focusing on their own risks. Impact means you're looking at real-world outcomes. Stewardship means you're looking at being responsible owners and actually encouraging those companies to do the right things, even if they're not necessarily perfect. And believe me, no company is perfect. So that's what responsible ownership and stewardship's about. Ethical is really about personal values. Screens are really about avoidance, what you avoid and what you select. Tilts about being a little bit more in one direction or a little bit more in another direction. And that's your middle ground. And then improving, I've just added this one in once the paper went live. I managed to change this slide the other day. Improving is about, we're not currently there, but we're working on it. And then alignment is when companies are looking to meet the requirements, say, of Paris Climate Agreement or the kind of targets of 5 and 7% that Mike was talking about earlier. It's important, though, for you to recognise also that this isn't one sector. People have been talking recently about the sustainable funds market. It isn't. It's not one market. We think of it like that, it helps. I focus on that area myself. But just recognise for a moment, if you would, that over the years, loads of different strategies have been invented. They all complement each other, but they all pick up on slightly different aspects that I've touched on. I'm not going to go through this in huge detail, but the point here is that different areas have become fashionable or popular at different times over the last 30, 40 years. And they're all valid, but they're intended for slightly different people. So if you want to summarize this, and Mike touched on this a little bit in his presentation, if you kind of think of it as a 4-3-2-1 type, I still can't do it, but anyway, it doesn't matter how many times I present this slide. 4 main issues: environmental, social, governance, and ethical. They're the 4 main topic areas that these funds focus on. 3 different approaches, as Mike said earlier: avoid, support, engage. They're the only 3 broad areas that a fund manager can look to apply, or different approaches the fund manager can apply. There's 2 real-world things we've got to do. One is we've got to finance, drive money into those solution companies that are going to actually be tomorrow's winners, tomorrow's oil companies. So, if you like, the wind companies today and those doing solar and making electric cars, whatever. So generally, those types of companies need to be grown. And we've got to transition existing companies, because no amount of money in wind farms is going to reduce carbon emissions. You only do that by actually cutting how much coal, oil and gas gets pulled out of the ground and used. So we've got to take those companies with us as well. And I know they're cooking and screaming, but we've actually got to deal with those companies. We cannot ignore them. Oh, sorry, and the one final one there, obviously, financial performance. We're talking about investments here. These funds are all intended to make money, right? So this is not philanthropy, this is about investment. I've just got a few minutes left, so I'm going to just touch on these last slides just to give you the main points of them. This next slide is to make the point that we know, and thank goodness the FCA has shown that they know now, that people come at this area for different reasons. And it was really important because people didn't used to understand this. Some people come at it because they think they're going to make more money. Some people want to change the world. And some people have just got a set of personal beliefs that speaks to who they are as people. So you may fit in one of these 3, or you may fit in all 3. But just recognise the funds are designed to meet different needs. And fund managers have different views like this too, right? Some of them are more about, oh, let's make money, and they may cut corners a lot more and go for tilts rather than stronger strategies. But, you know, only history will tell us, you know, exactly what does and doesn't form better. But logically, we know we've got to change how we behave. So the logic of these areas is sound. And then the next slide is really just to say that I've been mapping different client attitudes and things that people ask financial advisors about to the different types of funds that exist for many years now. And what I want you to really understand is that no one fund suits everybody. So there are some funds that are very broad-based, and I've called them here environmentally themed or sustainably themed or focused. And they tend to, if you're interested in this stuff, those funds tend to tick most boxes. But others focus more on environment, more on social, more on ethical stuff. Some are faith-based. There's a whole spectrum of different strategies that are all, you know, complementing each other, but different. So they do meet different people. So that's why you've got to look under the bonnet on this stuff. And you've got to recognise, for instance, that the types of funds that have become problematic, where the greenwash allegations have come through, we want them on board, but they've not explained what they do particularly well, are a lot of the funds where I've called them things like limited exclusion, ESG plus, and sustainability tilted, where there's going to be quite pragmatic decisions made in terms of where they invest. And they tend, therefore, to hold, or some of them hold some really, really controversial assets. So some of them will have, you know, a couple of oil companies in the top 10. Most don't. If you're looking at the likes of M&G and Lion Trust, no, they won't. But with some very big companies, and they will say, oh, it's because we're going to change what they do. Well, they haven't managed it yet. So you've got to question who it's appropriate for. But they're not wrong. They're just not going to suit the views of everybody in this area. And then even when you're looking at the impact side of things, there are different strategies. So some people will be focusing on social impact. Others will be focusing on environmental. Others will do both. Some will be doing lots of measurements. Some will be very invested in solutions companies. Others won't be. A lot of people are mapping to the SDGs now, but as we know, mapping to the SDGs can be a bit dubious. So again, look under the bonnet. The SDGs are phenomenal, they're wonderful, I love them. However, they are being used and abused. So read further. When you see people referencing SDGs, do not leave it there. Oh, and the other thing to say there, I've listed all those different things. The number of funds that say they do all of that, 6. Okay? There's not a lot of funds that do all of it. So you've really got to look at how they vary. One very quick slide on where I think the whole investment market is going. We know, and part of the greenwash issues have been related to the fact that mainstream investors, like everybody, all investors, are taking this sort of stuff a lot more seriously now. And that's a good thing, right? As long as they don't confuse it with funds that really just, put it first and foremost. So we're seeing a lot more stewardship activity, responsible ownership, voting shares, etc. And we're seeing a lot more risk mitigation, people staying away from companies where they think there's going to be substantial stranded assets or the company, frankly, is badly managed. Okay, so this is what we're looking at. Top and bottom, responsible ownership, risk mitigation, standard investment procedures now increasingly. What goes in the middle can vary. If it's sustainable funds, you can expect that it's going to have strategies that focus on sustainability in the future of the planet, etc. But pretty much any investment now can kind of fit within this sandwich and be topped and tailed by strategies that were once referred to as being just about sustainable funds. They're not now. And my final thought is, if you take nothing else away from this presentation, just recognise the meaning of the word sustainable, and this is where the FCA is getting at with their paper. If something is not sustainable, if a fund or anything is not sustainable, it's unsustainable. It just literally cannot carry on. Now, time periods will vary depending on what the company does, but that's the gist of this. And if you want one recommendation in terms of reading, if you want to read up on this subject and why the business aspect makes sense, for goodness sake, invest in Kate Woolworth's book, Donut Economics. It just explains what this is all about. So I've got a summary slide next and then I'll close, so I'm not going to say much on the summary slide. Did anyone, sorry, did you get that photo? Are you okay with that? I can see a few of you taking photos. But yeah, Kate Woolworth's book's brilliant because it just puts it in economics terms and it speaks to those people who are used to crunching numbers, but whilst understanding the planetary constraints as to what the rock we live on can cope with. So I'm going to close there. I'm not going to bother going through the last bit, just to say things are changing really fast. The regulators are really onto this now, thank goodness. And I really think it's going to help massively. They've done a really, really good job. And they are to be applauded, and I hope that the industry gets behind them. And with that, I will close and say thank you very much. I don't know if we've got time for questions, but I'm happy to, but I will, I'm not being told to get off the stage, but do you want to, yeah, please.
One quick question. Thank you. Very interesting. I was wondering whether you think voluntary carbon markets, are they part of the problem or part of the solution?
Look, I think it remains to be seen. I have my reservations. I don't know. There are some really good technical people that seem to think that they're a good idea. So, and I haven't looked into them in great detail, but I handle with caution. Maybe that's probably something that Mike or Ben could pick up on better than I could this afternoon session. But I'm a bit like that. Right. I'm going to jump off the stage now, but I am staying around. I'll be here for another couple of hours, so please come and talk to me if you have any further questions. Thank you very much for listening.